We interrupt this record to bring you a special bulletin. The reports of a flying saucer hovering over the city have been confirmed.
Did you really go out with an alien? Uh-huh. What was it like? Real different.
Becoming Human, a Mork and Mindy podcast. Hello, listeners. This is Paula Schaffner with episode 82, Metamorphoses, the TV show. This first aired on January 21st, 1982. The IMDb synopsis is, a short circuit causes Mork and Mirth to switch minds. So this is not about somebody turning into a cockroach. It is a Freaky Friday situation, sort of. This was the 8th episode, directed by Bob Claver, and it was the only Mork and Mindy episode by the writing team of Bob Perlow and Gene Braunstein, although they did do 3 episodes for Laverne and Shirley, and I am familiar with the writing for Who's the Boss, among other sitcoms. There's no establishing shot. We just start with Mindy's face in black and white on a screen. She says, well, I guess that's all the time we have for today. Then we zoom out to reveal that the screen is part of a KTNS 31 camera. She says she'd like to thank her guests, Mary Snyder, the author of the bestseller, I Bet You'll Ban Nuclear Energy After Your Hair and Teeth Fall Out. So another of the jokes about nuclear energy on the show. And now we've zoomed out enough to see that Jake is back behind the camera after a long while. The woman on stage right is in a business outfit. Mindy is in the middle and her hair is pinned up. She's got a red blouse, a black blazer, gray slacks, and brown heels. On her right is a blonde boy with glasses and a nice suit. He's working on a Rubik's Cube. The Rubik's Cube was designed by Erno Rubik in 1974, but they really broke big in 1980, and certainly by 1982 it was a very popular fad among all ages, and they still are sold, and I think are still recognizable. Mindy introduces the boy as our local Rubik's Cube expert, Tommy Nesbitt. She pats his arm and thanks him and says it's been a wonderful week. There's a cut back to Tommy, who doesn't seem to be making any progress, so I guess it's supposed to be funny that he's the local expert, but this is the best that Boulder can do, a kid who can't solve the Rubik's Cube on the air, even though there were experts on TV at that time who were solving it within a matter of minutes. Mindy says, and as Wake Up Boulder completes its first week on the air, I'd like to thank someone who exhibited a great deal of faith in this program and in my career, our general manager, Miles Sternhagen. So another reference to Miles Sternhagen, who we haven't seen, but he's still this presence off screen for now. She signs off and wishes everyone blue skies and green lights, as in traffic lights. Jake tells her not to just sit there. She should shake hands and pretend she just heard something funny. So she fakes laughter, pats Tommy's arm, and shakes hands with Miss Snyder. Then Jake says they're out, so Mindy stands. Miss Snyder exits, but Tommy keeps working at the cube. Jake says it was nice of Mindy to say all those things about Sternhagen. It'll be a real comfort to him. Mindy doesn't know what Jake is talking about and wonders if Mr. Sternhagen is sick. Jake says the show ought to be called Wake Up Mindy. Sternhagen is out, axed. We knew from his first appearance that he had a rough history with various stations. It's not explained why he's fired in this episode. I don't know if it was just they wanted to make some changes or if his alcoholism was a problem. They don't really need a reason because there's always shakeups on TV, including local stations. And that is, in fact, one of the subjects of this episode, although that isn't mentioned in the IMDb synopsis. Mindy says, you're kidding. Jake says, no, we got a new boss. So you just polished the wrong guy's apple. And that's a very old-fashioned term for flattering somebody, being an apple polisher. Jake says he, meaning the new manager, is such a jerk. Tommy excitedly runs over with the completed Rubik's Cube. Each side is one solid color. He says he did it and they should turn on the camera. So apparently he doesn't know how TV works. The show is over. He says that he's finished and she says, yeah, you're not the only one, because she feels like she's finished. Then we get a sunny daytime exterior of the house with snow on the ground. Fred is alone in the living room and he's wearing a Mozart sweatshirt and tan slacks. He's standing by a table that's behind the couch and it's got a train set up on it. He says, all aboard for the McConnell Express, now leaving for Anaheim, Azusa, and Cucamonga. And that's a reference to Jack Benny's radio show, so very dated by now. You either have to be very old or very aware of 30s and 40s pop culture to get that one. But it does fit Fred's generation. Mork and Mirth enter from the bedroom to applause, including whistles. They're standing close close together and acting like a train. They're both wearing red bandanas and blue conductor's caps. Mark says, "Oh, Pops, it's perfect in every detail. Look at that. Little people, little houses. All it's missing is a robber baron and exploited Chinese labor going." And then he does the accent. "I gotta get to San Francisco." Fred laughs. Not as racist as the previous episode. At least here the accent is making a historical, political point. Mirth wants to be the engineer and begs Daddy. Fred says Mirth should watch him for a while to get the hang of it. Fred gave these trains to Mindy over 20 years ago, but she wasn't interested in any toy that didn't cry or wet or have a best friend Midge. So a reference to Barbie. Also dolls that cried and wet their diapers. We are still not clear how old Mindy is this season. Allegedly she's 28 or 29. If she had been aging regularly from the first season, then she would have been 24 or 25 at this point. Over 20 years ago, I guess, is plausible. Mirth tells Grandpops that was a very moving, nostalgic speech. Then he says, "Now fork over the controls." Fred laughs again. Fred lets him try it, and notice he didn't actually instruct him. He just simply demonstrated it for a couple minutes. Mirth doesn't know how and says, "What a bummer." Fred puts his arm around Mirth's shoulders and comforts him. So some nice grandfather-grandson moments in this episode. He says there's just a few loose connections on the Transformer. It's old and it doesn't work very well anymore. And I thought there was going to be a reference to some old celebrity. I even thought maybe Mork was going to make a Reagan joke. But he says, "You understand, son, like the Nielsen ratings." And that is one of several jokes about television in this episode. And also joke about how badly Mork and Mindy was doing in the ratings in its fourth season. I don't have a number handy, but it definitely had fallen out of the top 30 at that point. Fred fixes the Transformer, and the train runs again. Mirth does some of his excited movements. Mindy comes in wearing the outfit from earlier, but with a tan overcoat. She says, "Hi, you'll never guess what happened. They fired Sternhagen." Fred waves, but the other two don't look at her, although Mork does say, "Hi, hun," big kiss. Mork pulls his kerchief up to his eyes and orders Mirth to fork over the controls. And he says to put all the coal in the bag and start shoveling the money in the fire, so reversing the two cliches. Mirth tells Daddy to stop it. They're playing trains, and Mirth is brand new at this. There's a cut to Mindy looking disappointed that they're ignoring her. Mirth tells Mork he can't be a robber all the time, even though he just said they're new at this, so when is Mork also a robber? Maybe other things that they play. Mirth wants to keep playing with the trains. Fred again looks amused. Mork says, "Come on now, son, you had your chance and you blew it really big." We've seen gradually over the season, Mork was very indulgent of the baby and spoiling him, and now he's starting to be sarcastic back to him. Mindy says, "Hey, is anybody listening to me? I mean, I think my career is more important than playing with trains." Which it is, but it's tough competition, obviously. Mork tells her that the 5:15's coming down the line. If no one throws the switch, Zeke's not going to get his mail-order bride named Gilda, creating an image of presumably a lonely prospector waiting for the bride that he's written away for. She asks him to turn off that thing just for a minute. Fred does so, and he apologizes to her. He calls her sweetheart. He goes over to her and asks her to tell him what happened, and he beckons to Mork. Mork says he should be the dutiful husband. Besides, Zeke sent her a phony picture anyway. Apparently Zeke and Gilda exchange pictures by mail. Mork says he would really like to help her, but his hands are tied because he has to experience this railroad stuff. She laughs and says she understands, and she calls him sweetheart. She tells Fred and Mork that they fired Sternhagen. They just sent him out on his ear without a word. Mork says, "Is nothing sacred? First the Ropers, now Miles Sternhagen." The Ropers was a spinoff of Three's Company, starring their former landlords, and it aired from March 1979 to May 1980, so it's not like its cancellation was recent, but it was recent enough that people would get that joke. Norman Fell famously did not want to be spun off and was happy at Three's Company, but because the characters are so popular and because the British equivalent, George and Mildred, was spun off of Man About the House, they decided to send them off. And they brought in Mr. Furley, but that's another pod. Mork and Mindy sit on the couch couch with Mork on the right. Fred takes his usual chair. Mindy says Sternhagen hired her. He gave her a shot at her own show, which we already know from the first scene, but this is what's on her mind. Now she doesn't know what's going to happen. Fred calls her honey and says she's very good. She'll be just fine without Sternhagen. So he's very supportive in this episode. But then he jumps to his feet and stops Mirth from tying the little family to the tracks. He goes over to him. Mirth tells Grandpops that they're only rubber. Bit of sociopathic behavior, but okay. Mork puts his arm around Mindy, who scoots closer. By the way, this is not a shippy episode. This is about as shippy as it gets. He calls her his little breadwinner. He sees that she's upset, but she has to remember that the darkest is always about 3 a.m., which is true. She mentions the big plug she gave Sternhagen. If the new boss heard it, she could lose her job. Now that seems a little bit silly, but she's still relatively new on TV. Just because she praised Sternhagen doesn't mean that that's necessarily going to look bad to the new boss. I mean, maybe he'll think she's loyal. It's not like she said that Sternhagen's the only person she ever wants to work for, but it is a very uncertain time, so it's understandable. In the background, Fred looks amused as he watches Mirth play with the rubber family. Mark says this could be a problem. If she's out of work, who's going to pay for the food, the rent, the bills, those little smoke pellets for the engine over there? I would hope that Fred would at least pay for the smoke pellets since he's moved this huge train set over here. Then Mork suddenly gets up and says, "All aboard, head him up." So he's drawn back to the train as well. Fred encourages Mirth to try the trains again. The three guys watch the trains while Mindy looks worried. We get the usual sunny daytime exterior of the TV station with snow on the ground. Jake and 4 extras are standing around. A black man with a blue blazer, a white shirt, and dark slacks opens the stage right door for a blonde woman who's in a similar outfit, but she doesn't have a tie. And Mindy also comes in, and she's still got her hair up, but now she's in shades of pink with a scarf, a blouse, and slacks. I think I've seen her in this outfit before. It's a nice one. The blonde, who we'll find out is named Judy Marino, says, "The way I see it, if you work hard and do a good job, they're always going to keep you around." Mindy says she's right, and she's not that worried. But then she asks how it was her hair and is she wearing too much lip gloss. Judy says she looks fine. The man, who we'll find out is named Stan Jackson, asks what Mindy is so uptight about. So this guy Pearson is a hotshot with a published thesis on programming. He's barely out of college. Besides, Stan is safe in sportscasting. Straightening his tie, he says there's always a stink when they fire a minority. So he's hoping that because he's black, that will help him keep his job. Mindy says she's not that insecure. After all, Boulder does have to wake up in the morning, right? She hasn't been hosting the show that long. If I remember correctly, there was a set decoration last season that said "Wake Up Boulder" or something similar to that. So it's possible the show's been around for a while, but she's only recently taken it over. And again, I don't get her schedule. Sometimes she's working nights, sometimes she's working mornings, sometimes she's on call. Jake comes over and says, "But not with you," meaning Boulder doesn't have to wake up with her. A young blonde man in a grayish blue suit, a light blue shirt, and a red tie enters from stage left. He's carrying a folder. Stan says, "Ahem, here comes our new boss, the one wearing a retainer." There are these continued jokes about how young he is. If he's fresh out of college, that doesn't make him that much younger than Mindy unless you believe that she's 28 or 29. Pearson shakes hands with a couple of the extras, a brunette white woman and another black man. Mindy says, "That's Pearson? He looks more like the general manager of a McDonald's." Judy thinks he's kind of cute. Jake says who cares? He's lasted so long because he's always kept his self-respect. He's never kowtowed to any of them. He's this older guy who speaks his mind, and that's what we've seen in previous episodes. But then he excuses himself and goes over to Mr. Pearson. He takes off his cap, so sign of subservience, and offers his hand. He introduces himself as Jake Loomis, cameraman. Mr. Pearson shakes his hand and says pleasure. Jake says nice suit, and there's a cut to Judy, Stan, and Mindy looking cynical. Jake says he's been with the station for 29 years now. He's got all the inside dirt on everybody. It sounds like he's offering gossip in exchange, or is he implying that he could blackmail Pearson? We had the episode where Mindy was doing a gossip show, so they could have just had Jake host it. Pearson tells Jake that in all the world there's nothing sadder than an old Fink. He pats Jake's back, but then he fires him. There's a cut to the other three looking worried. Jake says, "Okay, fine, great." To Pearson's back, he says, "You're gonna meet the same people on your way down as you did on your way up," which is a cliche about success and failure. He strides over to the stage right door. Then he turns and says, "Sonny," like it's this big insult, and Pearson looks like he's been hurt by that. And then Jake storms out. Mindy says, "Poor Jake, I feel sorry for him, and I don't even like him," and we had established that earlier in the season. Mindy doesn't really like Jake because he doesn't want to be liked. Stan has both hands in his pocket, but he briefly takes one out so he can scratch his neck with one finger. He says, yeah, me too. I wonder if I can get his parking space. Again, there's stuff about the parking spaces at this TV station, like in the previous episode. Judy has her arms crossed. Mr. Pearson claps for attention. He introduces himself as Daniel Pearson, your new general manager. First of all, he would like to put an end to the rumor that people are going to be fired. That is not a rumor, that is a fact. Tonight, he's planning an informal but mandatory get-together at the station to share some of his ideas. He also wants to use this as an opportunity to get to know their families better. And it's not clear why he wants to meet the families of people he's barely met, but you just kind of have to go with that premise. He says that they're here to make KTNS the place to be, at least for some of them. There have been some reaction shots of Mindy, Stan, and Judy, but now we get a reaction shot of the 4 extras. Mindy says to Judy and Stan, let's all try to keep in touch, because she feels like she at least is going to be fired. Stan says, sure, Mindy, and Judy says, yeah. Stan goes over to stand next to Mr. Pearson, with Judy following him.
Mr. Pearson, Stan Jackson, sports at 6 and 10.
Pleasure.
Ooh, hey. What a grip you got there. You know, you'd look great in a Broncos jacket. Oh, there's something I'd like to remind you of. I'm black.
Hi. I'm Judy, your weather person. I'd like to welcome you with a big KTNS warm front.
How sweet. She's very sweet.
There's more where that came from.
So we can see both Stan and Judy doing their best to win over Pearson to Mindy's disbelief. I thought it was funny that Judy's warm front is just a peck on the lips, but I guess it's meant to be very seductive. Mort comes in and calls Mindy Hun twice. He claims to have an important telegram from a major news network in New York. She tells him not to do this to her, but he says, read it, ha! I have to sing it.
5, 6, 7, 8. We're looking for a newscaster, one who speaks quite well and who doesn't wear a tooth like Howard Cosell. And if you've been through college, please join our team, sign Roon
This is painful to watch, although I think it's sort of meant to be painful. And there's a reference to Howard Cosell, the sportscaster, who was a very common object of humor in the 70s, but we're close enough to the 70s to still refer to his toupee, for instance. There's a rhyme of college and Roon Arledge. Arledge had a sports background, but at the time of this episode, he was president of ABC News. And because Mork has been so embarrassing, Stan asks Mindy if her parking space is any closer than Jake's, and then he exits. Mindy chuckles and tells Mr. Pearson that that was just a little joke. She shakes Mr. Pearson's hand and says she's Mindy McConnell, employee, for now. She laughs nervously. She introduces her husband, Mork, and again says that he was just kidding around. She says that Mork is a little nervous about her job. Mr. Pearson tells her not to apologize. He appreciates family concern. Just this morning, his mom called to make sure he was dressed warmly. They chuckle. Mork says, well, Oedipus Schmedipus, Mindy really loves Mama's boys. So reference to the Oedipus complex. She glares at Mork and he looks sheepish. Mr. Pearson isn't offended. He tells Mindy that he loves Mork's sense of humor, and she has to bring him to the party tonight. He bets that Mork can give him a couple pointers on where young people are at, which is, I guess, ironic because Mr. Pearson is so young. One thing that doesn't come up in this episode is the Orkin aging process is backwards, but this put another layer to all this. Mindy says she will. Mork says for sure. Valley or surf slang to sound trendy. Mr. Pearson walks away, followed by Judy. Mindy calls Mork honey and says, don't you have to be leaving now? He says no, but she tells him to think again and yanks his arm. He says she's right. He says he should go home and wait by the phone for those important calls that are going to be pouring in, and then he calls her babe.
Sweetheart, I'm going to do for you what Ellen Hamill did for Suzanne Summers.
I think you already did.
You tell a friend.
So we get another Three's Company related joke, and one of the funnier exchanges on this episode, Suzanne Summers had some contract controversy and was egged on by her husband, who somewhat managed her career, although she did have a manager as well. And that did not go well for Suzanne, and she was fired from Three's Company, and that was after the Ropers had left. That was the 1980 to 81 season, so definitely within the memory of the audience. Tell a Friend had to do with the Alpha Beta supermarket commercials that Alan Hamill was known for at the time. There's a nighttime exterior of the house with snow on the ground. Mirth is in the same outfit running the train by himself. It stops and he throws a little tantrum. He asks Daddy to come into the living room and make the train work. Mork enters from the bedroom, tying a bow tie. He asks, where's the happy face he knows so well? And Mirth grumpily repeats this, and that's happened before, where he sarcastically quotes his dad. He tells him, if you want to see a happy face, go see Annie. And of course, that's the famous musical about Little Orphan Annie. He says, if Mork wants to see his face, see this. He pouts, and Mork calls him a little bulldog boy. So Mirth growls. Mork says he'll fix the train and make it run better than Mussolini ever did. So, of course, the thing about Mussolini made the trains run on time. Again, there's some odd historical jokes this season. Mork says he just has to tighten this little doohickey here and this little doohickey there. Sometimes he's very scientific, but not here when he's talking to his young child. Voila, it's fixed. Mr. Goodwrench, move over. Mirth tells Daddy he's truly a superior being. He has brainwashed his son into thinking that organs are superior to Earthlings. Mork says, oh shucks, and then he wants to play this one together.
Daddy?
Yes, son?
Why am I talking to you and looking at me?
Shazbot! Wait, don't panic. There's an explanation for this. There's always an explanation for everything. The only thing I can't explain is this. Why is it that Bob Hope is still doing commercials?
Fine until...
Don't do that.
Hey, Mork, are you there?
So we get the mind switch. It's somewhat contrived, although not any more than in the various versions of Freaky Friday, or in, for instance, Gilligan's Island, when Marianne gets a bump on the head and thinks that she's Ginger. Again, go with the premise. For most of the rest of the episode, now we get Robin Williams and Jonathan Winters imitating each other. So, of course, Jonathan says Shazbot. And the knock is because Mindy is home. She wants Mork to open the door because her hands are full. Mork tells Mirth, it's your mother. Now try to relax. Pretend nothing happened. It'll put her up tight. Mirth starts to throw a tantrum and Mork tells him to stop. Mindy knocks on the door again and Mirth reluctantly quiets down. Mork opens the door. Mindy enters carrying dry cleaning and asks what's going on here. Mork calls her little pooter and Mind 3 times and he says big kiss twice. We had these catchphrases established earlier in the episode in case this was the first episode you ever saw, but of course they've been coming up all season and somewhat in season 3. She of course thinks that this is Mirth talking and then Mirth calls her mommy. So Mork calls Mirth a stoolie, like a stool pigeon. He says that they crossed minds, and then he points out that he got a little taller. Mindy looks up and asks, why me? Mork also looks up. The next scene is again in the living room. Mindy is in the same outfit from earlier, but the dry cleaning and her overcoat are hung up on the door. She's standing by the train set and has her hand to her head. She says, you transferred minds through a train set? This is like a bad horror movie, and I'm married to the mad scientist. Freaky Friday and other mind switch movies generally tend to be comedies. I thought it was interesting that she sees it as horror. And it's not even really that Mork invented something. He was just working with the toy set that Fred bought back in the 60s, or maybe even the 50s. She's looking at Mirth, so Mork says, wrong body, he's over here. She asks how long this is going to last. Mork doesn't know. Maybe 24 hours, maybe 150 years. But he wants to get to the party where they have those little crackers. Mindy gets them mixed up again. Then she has Mirth go upstairs to his bedroom while she and his father have a little talk. He says, oh, so that's the way it is. He's in and I'm out. You ask for it once again. Butchie returns. The pout face is, I guess, that Jonathan Winters, when he pouts, looks like a bulldog. And In a couple of the early Mirth episodes, he had a nickname, Butchie the Dog-Faced Boy. So that sort of is a return. Mork points and tells his son that if he does that, meaning pouts, his face will freeze. Mirth points out that it's not his own body that's freezing. He calls Mork a joke, and then he says he's hip. And I didn't know if that was something that maybe Jonathan Winters had said to Robin Williams to mock him. It felt kind of like an in-joke. He heads upstairs to light applause. Mindy thinks she and Mork should sit on the couch. Mork says KO 3 times. He still wants to go to the party. They sit on the couch and she tells him she can't take him to the party with that face. And the thing is, if he had not shown up at her work, she could have passed him off as her husband and Pearson just would have thought that she was married to an older man. Mork calls her little pooter and he calls her Mint 3 times. He wants to make something as clear as her complexion and then he lightly touches her face. The chances are that the boss is going to want to get a look at Mork. And he says, then take my body, please. And he winks. And I guess that's sort of like, take my wife, please? And he wants her to take his body with their son's mind in it to the party, even though he's the one who wants the crackers and other treats. Mindy says her job is hanging by a thread as it is. She can't take Mirth to the party. He's just a child. Mork says true, but he's half a superior being. Again, Mork says Mirth will be almost as good as he would have been. And Mindy says that's what she's afraid of. We get the same TV studio set, but with a few more extras, including a woman I assume is Stan's lovely wife, although she doesn't have any lines. There's a table with a yellow tablecloth, red punch, many cups, possibly more than there are guests, chicken wings, and some fruit platters. As the subtitles put it, easy listening music plays. Mirth and Mindy enter the stage right door, and he's in Mork's usual semi-formal outfit. She's in a very nice long burgundy dress with a copper belt and brown boots. Her hair is tied back. Mirth says, call this a party? Where are the little party hats? And the pushy father with the movie camera going, stay by the bowl, stay by the bowl. I did not get that joke. Is it like a mechanical bowl? Why would a bowl be at a children's party? I thought he was saying bowl, B-O-W-L, but the subtitles said B-U-L-L. And honestly, Mirth probably hasn't gone to that many children's parties. Certainly not on Earth and probably not on Orc. But maybe he's seen them in movies or TV. She starts to call him Mork and then corrects herself to Mirth. She reminds him that her job is at stake. She takes his hand and she tells him to remember their agreement. If he's a good boy and doesn't embarrass mommy, she'll give him a note to get him out of gym. Apparently the Orkin school, that only meets once a month, has gym class for the equivalent of kindergartners. Mirth says he'll try to act like an adult and calls her mommy, and she calls him a good boy. She calls herself mommy and says that she should do all the talking, and she shushes him. Mindy is glad to see Jake back, but it turns out he's a waiter and he's serving stuffed mushrooms. Mirth calls him older than dirt. And Jake doesn't point out that they've already met, because of course he's met Mork. Jake says to give him a break. Ain't I had enough for one day? So poor Jake. The real victim in this episode, I think. Mindy tells him no thank you about the stuffed mushrooms, but she's glad to see him working again. Jake says this is just temporary. He's going to ask Pearson for his job back tonight. And then if Pearson says no, Jake is going to kill him. Okay, maybe I don't feel that sorry for Jake. Pearson says, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. And we can see that he's in an orange Broncos jacket, so presumably Stan used his sports contacts to get that jacket for Pearson in the last few hours. Pearson would like to introduce everyone to the future of KTNS.
Juju? Now, this is our morning schedule. You will notice that the only major change is the removal of Wake Up Boulder and Cartoon Carnival in place of our morning movie. So, Mindy, Skipper Bill, you're out.
Don't worry, Mindy. He's dead.
Now, I am planning a powerhouse opening for the new season. To kick off the Monday movie, you can look forward to Ben Gazzara Week.
Just like Stan used the Broncos jacket to win over Pearson, Judy has apparently successfully used her feminine wiles on Pearson, who now calls her Juju. And he says he's going to discuss the morning schedule, but we actually see the whole schedule for the day. 8 to 9 a.m. is Wake Up Boulder, 9 to 10 is Cartoon Carnival, 10 to 11 is Gomer Pyle USMC, so from the 60s, and 11 to 12 is Petticoat Junction, also from the 60s, 12 to 1 is Gilligan's Gilligan's Island, definitely from the 60s. And 1 to 2 is at one with. I have no idea what that's a reference to. It may just be a filler entry, or it could be an in-joke. 2 to 3 is The Outer Limits, so that's early 60s, around the time of Twilight Zone. 3 to 4 is The Big Valley, again, 60s and a Western show. 4 to 5, Death Valley Days, is a stealth Reagan joke, 50s TV anthology that he hosted. 5 to 6 is Colorado Corner, which sounds really cute. 6 to 7 is The Partridge Family, one of the more recent shows. 7 to 8 is KTNS Action News, and that was a thing. I don't think we hear it as much anymore, but Action News, like, it just makes the evening news sound more exciting. 8 to 9 is the Texas Wheelers. I had to look this one up. It was on 1974 to 75. It's described as an earthy comedy about the 4 motherless Wheeler children and their lovable but cantankerous father, Zach. It was created by Dale McRaven, so I'm assuming that that was a little joke on him. It starred Jack Elam, Mark Hamill, Gary Busey, and others, and it ran for 13 episodes. So my guess is that it was probably not one of Dale McRaven's more successful pre-Mork-a-Mindy jobs. 9 to 10, Perry Mason, very successful long-running mystery courtroom show, 50s and 60s. 10 to 11, we have KTNS Action News again, and 11 p.m. Movies, spelled MOVIE''S, till dawn. Pearson says the only major change is that Wake Up Boulder and Cartoon Carnival will be replaced by the morning movie, and Cartoon Carnival is hosted by Skipper Bill, and so that's that older looking male extra. Well, that was a thing, I would say 50s, maybe into the 80s, but not so much by then, where you would have a local cartoon show with a host with a simple costume. Could be a clown or a skipper in this case. Jake tells Mindy not to worry because Pearson is dead. And so obviously he's bitter about being fired himself, but he's also sort of this avenging angel on her shoulder. And Pearson is planning a Ben Gazzara week. Ben Gazzara was then 51. He was actually a very respected actor, so I'm not sure why the writers decided to pick on him, or why, for that matter, he would have an appeal to a fresh out of college station manager. But again, we will go with it. Mindy goes over and tells Mr. Pearson that he's made a big mistake. And that's the thing with Mindy. This is very in character for her, that she will be nervous, but she will try and stand up for herself. She says she's not just saying this because she's the host of the show, but she really believes that Wake Up Boulder is an important, intelligent program and really performs a service to the community. And meanwhile, Mirth is playing with a punch. We don't know if Mindy is being idealistic. We don't really know how much of a service it's performing to the community. The thing with the kid with the Rubik's Cube was cute. She did discuss nuclear power, so that is an important topic, but gosh knows what the rest of the week was like. But, you know, compared to a Ben Gazzara movie, I guess it's more socially conscious. No offense to Ben Gazzara. Mr. Pearson says this has nothing to do with her personally. It's strict economics. Mirth says he likes the Roadrunner. Mindy tells him not now, but Mr. Pearson wants to hear about what the general public has to say. Mindy says, oh, maybe not, and laughs nervously because she's worried what Mirth is going to say.
Well, I like when the Roadrunner goes, beep, beep, and then I go, beep, beep.
Are you saying that a grown man like yourself watches cartoons every morning?
Yes, I've seen Popeye 14 times. And if you run it backwards, it has an ending. But you know, basically what I really like is like when the coyote will paint like a tunnel on the side of a mountain, and then the Roadrunner just goes right through the tunnel, and then when the coyote tries to go through, he becomes two-dimensional.
So we get Robin Williams as Jonathan Winters imitating the Roadrunner. And there's another of these surprising mentions of Popeye in this season, more than a year after its release. Mirth has seen Popeye 14 times. Mirth was not even alive when Popeye came out, and I don't think it would have been on Betamax, maybe, at that point. I don't know that it would have had VHS. I don't think it would have been on TV that much, because because it used to take a really long time for movies to get to TV, successful or not. But I'm going to say that there was a movie theater in Boulder that did not specialize in first-run movies, and Mork has taken Mirth to see this movie 14 times. And the thing about, if you run it backwards, it has an ending. I think that that's a joke that Robin Williams made in other contexts as well, like in concerts. And the thing about Popeye, I love Popeye, but they pretty much ran out of money. They had to push their way through filming the ending with just the main characters. Shelley Duvall, may she rest in peace, gave it her all and faked wrestling with an octopus where they were no longer able to control its movements. And it was just kind of a fiasco. Good triumphs, Bluto is defeated, etc., and Popeye eats spinach, and people are reunited and so on. But I could see how, to Robin, it would feel like the movie did not have a good, strong ending. That was the other really funny line in the episode, for me, of course. And you can hear the audience reaction. We get Mirth explaining the cartoon. Then Mindy says what Mork is trying to say is he appreciates an altered sense of reality, something that contrasts with the drabness of everyday life. Mr. Pearson says he knows that. Mirth is now standing behind Mr. Pearson, and he starts looking at the food on the table. Mr. Pearson says his morning movie will accomplish the same thing as a Roadrunner cartoon. Mirth bends an apparently plastic banana and says, "Bummer, this is not real." And so then we get this thing of Mirth commenting on the food and Mr. Pearson thinking he's talking about television. It's not explained why there is fake food on a buffet table, if this is just an added insult to the staff at KTNS. Mr. Pearson wonders what Mork means by that, by it not being real. Pearson ends up BSing that a metaphorical approach means that movies can only simulate reality, while cartoons, by virtue of their being so totally unreal, create their own level of reality. So therefore, ergo, it only follows that all that which is real is that which is completely unreal. And then he thinks that he touched on this in his thesis. Mirth, meanwhile, has been examining more of the fruit, and he says, "Oh, these are real." And I think he's looking at grapes at that point. Pearson says, "Oh, that's brilliant. Reality is direct personal experience. Oh, Mindy, I had no idea that your husband was so perceptive about our medium." She says neither did she. Mirth says, "I want more, though. I'm still hungry." Pearson says, "Of course, you're still hungry." Mirth says, "Unfulfilled." Pearson says, unfulfilled." Mirth says, "You got it. You're still hungry because TV menus are limited these days, which is why people are hungry for knowledge and exchange of ideas. Right, Mindy?" I thought it was interesting to say that in an early cable era that TV menus are so limited. Menu in a double sense, with food, of course. As Mork plays with the food, including using the banana as a baseball bat, she says it's up to their program to be able to bring the public information that will help feed their hunger. Pearson says, "Like a talk show. What a great idea." She says, "Yes, something really different." And he starts to think about what he'll call it, and Mirth puts some kind of green vegetable under his lip like a mustache, and then he raises his arm, and I didn't know if it was a Hitler joke, but it shows up in the closing credits. Pearson says he will call the show Stop Sleeping Boulder, so instead of Wake Up Boulder. And yes, this is long before woke. Mirth is eating a vegetable, and he says, "Finally something good." Mr. Pearson says, "Oh, it is, isn't it? Gosh, I love this business." Now all Pearson needs is the perfect host to make it work. Mirth notices a small bouquet on the table. Why it's there, I don't know. And he says, "Oh, look, pretty, right under my nose." Pearson says, "Right again, Mork. What we need is someone who can exude intelligence, warmth, and grace. And until they find somebody, Mindy is it." Pearson says, "Well, I've just created my first show. Gosh, now I know how God and Norman Lear felt." And he exits the stage left door. So he has basically reinvented the show that she was already on. And of course, Norman Lear was a very successful TV producer of All in the Family, Maude, Good Times, etc. Mindy tells Mirth he's an amazing little boy. He got Mommy her job back, at least temporarily. She's very proud of him, and she calls him sweetheart. He thanks her and calls her Mommy. But he wants to go home now. Daddy's shorts are really riding up on him. So even though it's Mork's body and Mork's underwear, it's riding up on him. And he says he's talking Major Snuggie here. She takes his hand and they leave. He tosses the banana into the punch bowl and says, "Fire one," like it's a torpedo. In the tag, we have from stage right to stage left, Mindy, Fred, Mork in Mirth's body, and Mirth in Mork's body. Everybody's wearing different outfits, so I'm assuming it's the next day. Fred asks if the reverse energy process will work. Mork says, well, as they say in French, and then he says something in French. Mindy says to keep a positive attitude. It always worked in Frankenstein. It's arguable whether it actually worked in Frankenstein, either the novel or the movies. Fred chuckles, but he says he knows it hasn't been easy for her. So again, Fred is very sympathetic in this episode. They didn't have to have him other than the train set, but it is nice to see him, and I think he is used well. And he points out that at least she got her job back, and she says, actually, Pearson turned out to not be such a bad kid after all. And again, he's maybe 2 or 3 years younger than her. He even gave Jake his job back after the bomb squad left, scene we didn't get to see. Mork tells Mirth that he was very glad to use his body, and he's sorry he didn't wash it before he gave it back to him. So apparently he didn't shower the previous night or this morning. He says, well, here goes, and they both touch the transformer, but nothing happens. Mirth tells his dad that he should work for the Defense Department. Political anti-military joke, I guess.
Oh, no. Look, you forgot to plug it in.
Oh, little Pooter, I'm back. Man.
Well, everything is back to normal again. I'm certainly happy for you kids. I guess I better get off to rehearsal.
Major bummer. This is worse. Now I'm bald. Look out. Here comes the face.
No, come on, don't worry.
We'll switch him back, and maybe after that, maybe you and I can switch. I've always wanted to be whistled at by construction workers.
So we get the reverse process. Mork is very happy, and he calls Mindy Little Pooter again. But now Fred is in Mirth's body, and vice versa. So it's a chance for Conrad Janis and Jonathan Winters to imitate each other. Conrad even jokes about his own baldness. We find out Mork wants to switch with Mindy and get whistled at by construction workers. And of course, we had the episode Mindy-itis, where Mork took on Mindy's personality. And arguably, they both got whistled at in the previous episode when they were hugging and kissing underneath the roofers. And I'll just note that they leave their child unattended with this dangerous train set when they go off in search of Mindy's father in their child's body. This was an interesting episode. I definitely do not think it lived up to its potential in a few ways, but it certainly had its moments, especially Robin Williams' pop culture jokes. In a sense, it's a variation on the "oh no, the boss is coming to dinner" plot, although really, Mindy could have just said that her husband was not feeling well and he's not able to come to the party. Because Mork had met Pearson, then we have to believe that Pearson will be disappointed if Mork doesn't show up. Mindy has to get her job back. The stakes are pretty high. And in a way, it's an episode about her career, but it's kind of not. The Freaky Friday mind switch, body switch thing. This could have been an opportunity for Robin and Jonathan to really go to town, imitate each other, but it felt a little bit flat to me. They're using the catchphrases and so on, but it felt more like Robin Williams was doing a variation on his standard child imitation. Jonathan was using some of Mork's catchphrases. And admittedly, Robin Williams is not an easy person to imitate. It's not bad. It wasn't painful. It was okay. The little thing of Conrad Janis at the end was cute. In Freaky Friday and some of the other movies and books and TV shows of that ilk, the point of a switch is that people learn more about each other. As the 1970s Freaky Friday theme goes, I'd like to be you for a day. Literally walking in somebody else's shoes and their feet. Learning what makes them tick. What assumptions have you made about them? Maybe also what assumptions have you made about yourself, about your relationship, and they both grow from the experience. That doesn't really happen here. Mork and Mirth don't gain any insights into each other. It's just a gimmick. The other part of this is the satire on local TV. It's all right. I mean, I didn't find it wonderfully funny or insightful, but it wasn't bad. I think that there is some inconsistent or ill-defined characterization with the Pearson character. He's supposed to be this fresh out of college kid, and he doesn't have any real world or real TV experience, and he's a bit of a pseudo-intellectual. It didn't click for me. He was played by Charles Bloom. I don't know how old he was, but he must have been still fairly young because his TV debut was as a student on an ABC after school special in 1976, and his last credit was in 1983. He does fine with the role. Nothing really stood out. On the other end of the age scale, we get the last appearance of Pat Cranshaw as Jake. Again, not an amazing actor, but he's fun. I don't know that there are any more episodes about the TV station. There probably are some references. He continued to work pretty much up to his death. In fact, there are a couple posthumous releases on IMDb. You could see him, for instance, in The Hudsucker Proxy and Best in Show. He did not have a wide range as an actor, but he was always this kind of funny older guy. Not a bad last appearance, and certainly a memorable image of him as a possible assassin. We also have Julian Kessner as Judy Marino. She was in 32. Her TV debut was on SWAT in 75. She had 2 different roles on Happy Days. I recognized her as a nameless character who kicks Jack's butt on a Three's Company episode. And she worked until 1997, but less so. And she died in 2007 at the age of 58. She doesn't play Judy Marino as the stereotypical bubble-headed blonde weather girl, but there's an edge to her. That this is somebody who is going to use what she's got to succeed. For some reason, she reminded me of Amy Poehler as I was watching this. Maybe facially, there was just something about her that hadn't occurred to me before. Maybe it was the nice blue blazer. And we have Randy Brooks as Stan Jackson. He was in 31. His first credit is from 1970 in the movie Halls of Anger. He did a mix of drama, action, and comedy, but I remember him from 60 episodes of the soap opera Generations. His last credit was in 2016, but he is still alive as of this recording. We don't know who plays Mary Snyder since she doesn't have any lines, but Tommy Nesbitt is played by Carrie Zadislow, and he has no other credits. I'm going to guess that he is the son of writer George Zadislow, and maybe he was good at Rubik's Cube, although I don't know that he would have had to been. They probably just handed him one that was solved at the end. Everybody's fine. No real standouts, no real weak spots. They're just doing what their assignments are. Getting back to the inconsistency of the Pearson character, there are 2 paths I can see that would have worked better. One would have been that this is a guy who is very exploitive and is trying to make the station more profitable, and so what he wants on the TV lineup is more sensationalistic shows. It seems kind of weird to have a 21, 22-year-old come along and want to program a lot of reruns of shows that are mostly 15 to 20 years old. So that was a little odd if they had had a thing where, oh, this guy loves old TV and he doesn't want anything new and he's into nostalgia. That could have been another way. So actually there's a third option, and that would have been to play up that he is a pseudo-intellectual and he doesn't like Wake Up Older because it is not intellectual enough. And then Mirth, in his down-to-earth way, talks about the Roadrunner, and Mr. Pearson realizes it's the simple joys of TV. We should be celebrating that, and humor. It didn't feel like they quite had a fix on what this was all supposed to be a parody of. It was just sort of, there's some shakeups at the station. I rate each of these episodes on a 0 to 4 egg scale, which measures how well it delivers what I'm looking for in the series. I was going to give this a 2 3/4 like the previous episode, but I got about 8 or 9 minutes in and I realized I didn't want to use any of the clips so far. There just wasn't anything that I felt you had to see. I just was fine paraphrasing and quoting. So that made me feel like I was remembering the things I did enjoy. I'm going with 2.5 out of 4 eggs. It is definitely not the weakest episode of the season. It does have some enjoyable things about it. I would recommend watching it if you are a Fred fan and or if you are curious what's happening with Mindy's career. It definitely doesn't live up to its potential. I also rate each of these episodes on a 0 to 4 heart scale, which measures how well it supports and promotes the romantic relationship of Mork and Mindy. And it's understandable. Much of this episode, Mindy's husband and son have switched places. But even before that, he's paying more attention to a train set than to her. Yes, we hear a lot of little pooters, but it's just not enough in itself. And on Mindy's side, she is worried about her job, so she's not feeling romantic anyway. I'm going to go with half a heart. It is one of the least shippy episodes of season 4. I do wonder if it was meant to air earlier in the season, but it doesn't really matter too much. All that we know is that Mirth is in school at this point, so it couldn't have been much earlier. If this is the last that we see of Mindy at work, in a sense we have closure, but also a new beginning. And we will not see Stan, Judy, Mr. Pearson, or Jake again if we do go back to the studio. 2.5 eggs, half a heart. This is Paula Schaffner with Metamorphoses, the TV show. Sometimes change can be a challenge.
Honestly, Bill, that child has not got a clue about my life. Not a single clue.
Sounds like a picnic to me. I wish I could switch places with her for just one day.
All right, what's going on out there?
Something really freaky?
Wait a minute. That's not my voice. That's Mom's voice.
Hey, what's the matter with you?
Good grief, what am I doing here?
That's not my voice, that's Annabelle's voice.
Are you okay, Annabelle?